All right, well, hey everybody, welcome back to Nerds of Flight. Here I'm Ben with November 74 Tango Papa. We're just doing a nice slow taxi out. It's chilly today, second day of the year in here in 2020. And we're going to go out and screw around a little bit, see if we can make sense of anything for you. I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine about his private pilot training, and just sort of lamenting, as many young pilots do, about how he's struggling to really get it on landing. And, you know, after helping a lot of people learn how to fly, both brand new first-time pilots ever in an airplane and fairly advanced all the way through, you know, airline transport pilot guys, I've noticed that part of the problem is always related to airspeed control. We always talk about how a good landing always begins with a good approach. And so an approach is really how we make our way from up there in the sky to getting the wheels to touch the runway. So when I think about what we want when we're making a landing, a good landing anyway, what I think about is I got my little toy airplane here. It's been through some rough times, missing the nose wheel here, and that's okay because I like to think we only have 2 landing gear on the airplane, the 2 out here. So we land there. There's no nose wheel there, then it makes it harder for you to want to land on that. But kind of gets to the heart of what I'm talking about. So the first thing that we need to understand is that we want to make a landing where the wheels come in and touch the runway. At about the same time, we're starting to run out of energy in the airplane. What I mean by energy basically is lift. 2 ways that we can create lift for the airplane. One is through airspeed, forward speed of that air going over the wings and creating lift. And we do that by controlling, if we have enough altitude, by controlling the pitch. So when we pull back on the yoke here, that makes the elevator back there pivot and want to make the airplane go up. And if I push forward on the yoke, then the nose wants to go down. But what happens when the nose goes either up or down is the relative wind that's coming here relative to the chord line of this wing. If you were to draw a straight line from the trailing edge to the leading edge, those 2 angles, that's called angle of attack. And how much angle of attack you have here directly affects how much lift the wing makes, but it also affects how much drag the airplane has from this oncoming air. So what tends to happen is as you pitch up by pulling back on the yoke, the nose pitches up, you get more drag, so the airplane naturally wants to slow down, and it starts to create more lift. But when we look at the actual lift equation, we get a lot more energy from airspeed than angle of attack. And the reason for that is that the formula for calculating lift is based on the coefficient of lift of a particular wing multiplied by the wing area, the angle of attack, obviously, and the square of the airspeed. So in other words, if I double my angle of attack, I get not quite, but approximately roughly double the lift. But if I was to double my airspeed, I would get 4 times or quadruple the lift. So what that means is when we come in and we're holding airspeed in the aircraft and we begin to take the power away and start to pull back on the yoke and pitch up, we create drag to start slowing the airplane down, but we're also converting that forward speed into lift. Now the goal here is to have the wheels touch down with nearly 0 vertical speed so that we don't come in and just plop down. We want to just kind of act like we're flying along the runway and we just happen to start rolling the tires on. That would be great. So the thing about the control surfaces
do I have time to take off in front of you?
Is that the slower we're going, when there's no airflow over the control surfaces, they don't have a lot of authority. See, I can move this and I don't get a ton of movement. But if I'm out here going 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100 knots, there's so much airflow over the wings, ailerons, and elevator surface that a smaller movement produces a much bigger result. Okay, so here's the problem. When you come in the pattern, if you're going too slow and you go into a flare and you go to arrest the downward sinking motion, if I don't have enough forward energy to trade for airspeed, I kind of just rotate, but the airplane just mushes and just kind of wants to sink into the runway there. But if I'm going way too fast, which is more often the problem, and to be honest, I mostly blame flight instructors for this, because we're always trying to tack on a little bit of extra airspeed, you know, for safety, so that our students don't get in trouble in the pattern and find themselves in a low and slow, attitude. And I respect that, I get that. But we got to use a little bit of common sense as well. And so what happens is if you start coming in and you got all this excess airspeed that all of a sudden you cross the numbers, chop the power, and now it's time to land, you go to pitch up like you're used to and you create a little extra angle of attack and you got so much energy from that V squared, the square of the airspeed, that the airplane tends to balloon up. Well, when it balloons up and we sense that we're getting farther from the runway, the natural response of the pilot then is to push the control yoke forward, lowers the angle of attack, the airplane starts to go back down, but at the same time starts picking up speed again. So then we realize, oh, that's not going to work. So then the airplane just kind of does this and porpoises kind of all the way down the runway. So we don't want to be too slow because then, we're going to sink and mush into the runway. And we definitely don't want to be too fast. Consider that between 1995 and 2008, almost 30% of all the accidents on record that were runway-specific accidents, almost 30% of those were from improper airspeed control, and almost all of those were too fast. So we definitely want to control our airspeed. So the question is, what airspeed should I be flying at? Well, the FAA gives us a lot of different guidance. One place you can look for guidance is in the pilot's operating handbook, and they have recommended airspeed ranges for normal and short field and soft field. But then you can also look at the Airman Certification Standards, which is the book that the FAA publishes for pilots to use and for examiners to use while determining whether or not an applicant is qualified to get a pilot's license. And one of the things, if you look in that Airman Certification Standards, is that it basically always goes back to the same recommendation. They use a term they call 1.3 times VSO. Well, VSO is the stall speed of the airplane. It's where the airplane aerodynamically stops making lift when you've got the angle of attack so high that the airflow separates and tumbles over the top of the wing. And that's typically on these light airplanes somewhere between about 15 and maybe 18 degrees of angle of attack. So let's say 16 degrees would be a good number there. So what happens is when you get to that angle of attack and the aircraft stalls, there's a speed associated with that. And there's a number of things that affect what speed that happens at. But they typically publish them at the most forward and the most aft center of gravities in the pilot's operating handbook. And then they give you a V speed called VSO, which is typically only predicated on the most forward CG, which is worst case scenario. Well, the reality is you're not typically going to fly all the time at extreme forward or extreme aft CG. And so what I like to do is look in the middle. So for example, at mid-weight and at mid-CGs, this airplane has something like 32 to 35 knots on my airspeed indicator of stall speed. So the FAA says that if you fly your approach at 1.3, that's about a 30% margin over stall, that's a good stabilized approach. Now I can fly slower at 1.2 or I can fly 1.5 if I want. But what I was going to do today is go out and take some landings and do some that are a little too slow and some that are a little too fast and show you how the airplane behaves and kind of give you an idea of what we're looking for. So again, what we want is nearly vertical speed up and down when the wheels finally touch. So as we come in, we're going to want to slowly pitch up by pulling back on the elevator. And when you sense that the airplane is rotating and it's not going up or down, we know we're in a good spot. If you pull back on the yoke and the airplane rotates and all of a sudden it gains a bunch of altitude, the thing you got to do is avoid the temptation to shove that nose back down. Just stop pulling back. Don't pull back anymore, and don't push the nose back down. If it wants to pop up just a little bit, just hang there. And as that forward speed bleeds off, it will start to sink again, and as it does, then you can rotate a little bit more and pull that off. If you need to, and you're slow, and you're rotating, and it's still sinking, and nothing's happening, what you can do is go over here and add a little bit of power, because what that will do is the slipstream, the accelerated air that's coming off of the propeller, will sort of energize the wing and the tail and give you just a little burst of forward speed and a little more energy in the airplane to help you get that landing. But but most of it comes from practice and getting your sight picture right of what I'm looking for. So as I'm looking down the runway and I'm holding the airplane off, what I'm trying to do is get to a place where I'm at the right airspeed and the right attitude, and I'm continuing to pull back on this yoke and not letting the airplane land, because then what happens is if I can get real close to the ground and I can get all of the energy extracted out of the airplane, it'll finally just boop, just touch down and roll on the runway. If I touch down with too much airspeed or not enough airspeed and I have not used all the energy in the airplane properly, well, it's just not going to be as good of a landing. But remember that the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I control my airspeed not out here, out there where I'm trying to land, but out there when I'm doing my approach. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to work on it. Hopefully it'll make sense to you. Everything will come out and kind of make sense. But if you find yourself flying your approaches at 65, 70, 75 knots, and then you go look in your POH and it's recommending 50 knots or 55 knots, that might be one of the reasons that you're struggling to make good landings. All right, so I'm going to do my run-up real quick. So I got gas, undercarriage, mixture prop, seatbelts, switches. Do my mag check real fast. So left, I got a drop in RPM, a rise in EGTs. Back to both. And right, I got a drop in RPM, I got a rise in EGT. Back to both, looking good. Test our prop governor here. 1. A little bit of roll there. That was nice. Didn't have my feet enough on the brakes. 2. And 3. Okay, so I got airspeed, I got my turn coordinator, my vacuum, all my gauges look great. And let me adjust my altimeter here on the digital one to match. There we go, looking good. Flaps, we're going to do 10 today. And when we come in on these landings, we're going to do all of our landings with the same flap setting. Say we'll use 20 degrees. That way our VSO speed won't be changing from using more or less flaps. The only thing I'm going to do is fly faster and slower on each of the approaches, but with the same landing configuration. So we're going to do our downwind approach at 80 to 90 knots, be about 70 or so on base, and anywhere from as low as 50 to as high as about 70 or 75 on our landing approaches. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. So trim set for takeoff, gas, undercarriage, mixture prop, seat belts, landing and taxi lights are on. You ready, Allie? Okay, got my passenger with me today. Sounds like we had one that was crossing over in the pattern. I'll come up here and have a look.
Lake Havasu traffic,
Here we go.
Okay, Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa's departing, runway 32, and we'll be staying in the pattern. Lake Havasu.
Gotta reach up and hit that suction every once in a while. All right, we'll come up over here to the end of the runway.
Everybody else in the pattern, Havasu.
Got the helicopter there, 3-2 on the runway. Power's going in, yoke's coming back, so there's takeoff power is set, gauges are green, airspeed's alive, 40 knots, we'll rotate, a little right rudder there, we're off. Okay. So our traffic pattern altitude here is 1,800. So we'll climb there. Bring our power back just a little bit, not the power but the engine speed. Just so I'm not hanging on the rev limiter basically. There we go, landing and taxi lights out. So climb checklist is complete. And we're looking good so far. Everybody seems happy, oil temps in the green, cylinder heads in the green. Plenty fuel. Okay, 1,700. Climbing pretty good, so I'll bring our power back. Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left crosswind and will be remaining in the pattern here for closed traffic, runway 32, Lake Havasu. As I take my power back there, that requires a trim adjustment if I want to keep my nose attitude there. Okay. So, my power setting in the pattern here, I like about 17, 18 inches, something like that. And that holds me pretty good airspeed, and my altitude's right at 1,820.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is now left downwind, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
Okay, so for this first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in relatively fast. My normal approach speed in this aircraft, probably somewhere in about the 60 knot range to have a normal approach. A short field landing in this airplane, about 50, maybe 55. But what happens is if you go a lot faster than that, as you'll see, it wants to eat up a lot of runway. A lot of people call it floating down the runway. What they mean by floating down the runway is simply that I can't get it to land because every time I pull back on the yoke, the nose comes up and I still have so much airspeed and so much energy that it just wants to gain altitude. So what I want to do is find just the right airspeed where I can pull back on the yoke, pitch that nose up a little bit, and there's not quite enough energy to make the airplane climb, but it gets me so that I get that nose up and I can hold altitude while the airplane actually gets more drag and starts slowing down. So we'll see what happens. I'll shoot this one, I don't know, 70, 75, something like that. Way faster than we need to, and I'll show you what happens. So we're downwind of beam the numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and bring my power back here to about 12 or 13 inches. I'm going to leave my flaps at 10. You notice I didn't bring them up because I knew I was just going to have to put them right back in for this approach. And remember that we're intending on being about flaps 20 for all these landings. So our speed is about 80 here. And what I like to do is fly down parallel to the runway till the numbers on the runway, if I look over my shoulder, are about a 45 degrees to me. That gives me a pretty good distance for where I want to be when I turn my base leg. And I'm going to go ahead and put flaps 20 here as we make the turn to base, and I'll make my radio call.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left base, runway 32, will be a touch and go, Lake Havasu.
So, gas, undercarriage, mixtures, props, seatbelts, and switches. So we are set up for landing here. We're 70 knots. And not looking too bad as far as the glide path here, but I don't want to get too much slower. So I'm going to keep our speed up. And what I'm going to be looking for when I come in and go to flare is when I pull back, you're going to see a nose come up, and we're going to gain altitude, and the airplane just doesn't want to land like that. So we are going to use pitch using our control wheel to control our airspeed. We use power to control our altitude.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is turning final, or runway 32, touch and go Lake Havasu.
So I'm almost even struggling to hold 70 knots because the airplane just simply doesn't want to go that fast on final the way I have it configured here. We're 74 knots now, looking good. I'm trimmed pretty much hands off. I got 2 red lights, 2 white lights, and about 500 foot per minute descent, 73 knots now. Flaps 20, and I'm going to start bringing my power back. When I get over the numbers is when your flight instructor will typically tell you, okay, let's chop that power. So I'll show you what happens when we do that. So we're on a really nice glide path here. We're just going too fast. I'm 71, and there's 70 knots, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right over the numbers, I'm going to chop my power, and then when I go, oh no, look at, now I'm gaining altitude, so I better put the nose down. Oh no, now it sinks. So I've really got to work all that energy out of the airplane before it touches down. Now that it's touched down, I really need to trim that nose back to normal so I don't have to fight it. I'm going to leave my flaps in, and we're going to go again. So we used up a lot of runway trying to get the airplane to the right speed and right attitude before we let it touch down. So I really had to work and be cautious there. If I was, a little too aggressive, it pops way up, and then you can see I put the nose way back down, and that's just not what I'm looking for. It makes it really difficult to consistently have good landings that way. So this time what we'll do a little bit steeper approach with the same flaps 20. And we'll get our speed way down there, maybe around 50 or something if we can get that slow. And you'll just see how much less energy there is in the airplane when I go to flare. So 1,500, taxi and landing lights can go out. Gas undercarriage, okay, looking good.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left crosswind and will be staying in the pattern runway 32 Lake Havasu.
1,600, 200 to go to our traffic pattern. So I'll start bringing my power back, which slows my rate of climb. That way I don't blast right through my target altitude. And once again, like I said, somewhere around 18 inches for this particular airplane tends to work pretty good. Looking for that traffic all the time.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left downwind, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
Alright. So that wasn't too terrible, but we sure used up a long way on the runway there, considering that we were nearly at ground level when we got to the threshold. We weren't even to the numbers on the runway, and we didn't actually touch down until we were almost 1,000 feet down the runway. And so normally, if you don't have a really good feel for that exchange of, you know, pitch attitude versus airspeed, and I really had to be patient. You see how much altitude we gained, and then I put the nose back down, and then I had to hold it. It's going to be tough to make consistent landings that way. So I'm about 40 feet higher than I want to be here, so I'm going to fix that real quick so we can get set up. And again, I'll do the same thing. We'll beam the numbers in our downwind. I'll set my power. I got my flaps at 10 already. I'm just kind of leaving them there for this exercise because that way I'm not getting them up and down, up and down. We're landing with 20 on the takeoff. I go back to 10 just to save myself a little bit of time there. So this time what I'm going to do is I'll have a lot of nose-up attitude you'll see on final approach because we're going to be going a lot slower. And you'll see how much more sink it gets, and I may even have to squeeze the power in there to arrest the descent rate. We'll see. All right, we're downwind of beam. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to about 12 there on my power. And now this time it's going to take a little more nose-up trim to get the airspeed a lot farther down. So, all right, 73.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left base, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and put my flaps to 20. And I'm going to keep bringing that nose up here because that nose attitude is what gives me the airspeed that I want. We're going to be a relatively high, steep approach. I got my nose all the way trimmed up. And I got my airspeed down about, let's see here, 54, 53, 52 knots. So this is what I mean when I say pitch for airspeed and power for altitude. So right now, I'm 49 or 50 knots, but I'm only losing like 200 or 300 feet per minute. So if I want to lose more altitude, what I'm going to do is reach over and just take the power away. That makes the nose immediately want to drop, but I'm going to keep holding it up because my nose attitude controls my airspeed. So here I am, 49, and we're going to turn final.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is turning final, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
Okay, so I'm 49, 50, something like that, making a nice, easy, gentle turn to final here. And I can control my rate of descent with how much power I have. I currently have about 13.5 inches, 49 knots on final. But my nose attitude's way up here at 5, 6 degrees nose up. It's almost tough to see over the nose if you're not a tall person. I'm 500 foot per minute descent rate. But because my nose attitude is so high, see now I'm sinking more than I want. So as I add power, I got to relax a little of that back pressure. Otherwise what happens is, I got 4 red.
Downwind for 3-2.
Otherwise what happens is, as I add power, it wants to pitch the nose up, and that slows me down even more. So that means what we call flying on the backside of the power curve. It takes way more power to fly slowly than if I just flew faster and took some of that power away. So you can see now I got about 16 inches, and my altitude's holding better now. My airspeed's still 51, 52 knots. As I bring that power out though, man, it really starts to sink. So here we are coming down, coming down. Now as I rotate, it pitches up, but very little happens. So I got, okay, that was a nice landing actually, but I had to keep a little bit of power in for that to be able to happen. So I got to get that nose up trim out of there real quick. And here we go again. So we had a lot of vertical descent rate there. Takeoff power set, gauges are green, and we're flying again. And so it makes, for a lot of people, that makes for a really uncomfortable approach because you feel a lot of sink in your stomach. So being too slow, you feel like you don't have any ability to use the yoke to arrest that descent rate. So I had to leave a little bit of power in just to make it so that the thing didn't plop down on the ground. But I could still control the airplane. I remember, even at that 49 or 50 knots.
Papa turning left,
See what this guy's left downwind, okay.
Boarding traffic straight off at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, very good. We got you in sight as well, sir, and there'll be no factor. We'll be staying in the pattern.
So you feel like you don't have a lot of authority to arrest the descent rate, and so it really tends to mush and go in. So you got to be careful with how fast you take that power away when you're flying slow. But even then, we were still well above the actual stall speed of the airplane. This thing, with that same 20 degrees flaps, is like 32, 35 knots, something like that. So we're not in any danger of stalling there. It's just that we're in danger of having a harder landing earlier than we anticipated. We go to rotate and we expect the airplane to float a little bit, and it just kind of keeps going down and plops down. So I got lucky on that one. It didn't have a really hard landing like I thought maybe we would show you. But, you know, every once in a while you get lucky. So this one we're going to do a normal approach. We'll do about 60 knots or something, which is a real comfortable speed in this particular airplane. And what you should see is we can just milk that landing right in there and hopefully have a good one. Now I say that and I'll probably screw the whole darn thing up, but that's okay. I think we'll get the idea. So take a look at the video when we get down, especially from the under the fuselage. Hopefully we got good GoPro footage there. And you should really be able to see the difference in rate of descent when we're going fast versus when we're going slow. So 1,820 feet. And
Lake Havasu, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is now left downwind, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
So we're ready for our final approach. Again, I got my flaps 10 already. Normally, if we just come back from a trip, we'd be flap 0, and we'd be slowing down in the pattern. But I like this speed, you know, 85 to 90 knots. We're currently 88 knots. I like that speed. I'm holding exactly on my altitude, 1,800 feet. Airplane's trimmed. I'm just sitting here bored. Be a good time to do my GUMPs, my pre-landing checks. So that's gas, undercarriage, mixture, props, seatbelts, and switches. So we're looking good. All right, let's find our buddy on final approach over here. There he is. He's just coming up on the numbers, so no factor for us. And once again, when we get to beam the numbers, we'll go power to 12. You notice how I do the same thing every time. Pitch attitude plus power always equals performance. So I got my pitch attitude where I want it. I'm going to set my power where I want it. And we're going to start our approach. All right, so he's over the numbers. We're abeam the numbers. Here we go. As I set that power to 12, remember the nose wants to drop, but I'm arresting that with a little bit of back pressure. So that's keeping me from being on a roller coaster ride, and it's also causing me to bleed that airspeed off. Now, I want to be, 70 to 80 knots here. So I'm pitching for that, but I'm putting a lot of back pressure here. So I'm going to grab my trim wheel and turn it until I don't have to keep that back pressure in. The airplane will just do what I want now, so I got time to think. All right, runway's about 45 degrees to us, 71 knots. Put the airplane in a little bit of a turn. Go ahead and add my flaps 20. That's going to add some drag and some lift. We'll be about 65 to 70 here on base.
0 Romeo Papa, clear of active.
And about 60 on final. 55 to 60, somewhere in there.
Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is left base, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
And again, if I feel like I'm lower than I want to be or higher than I want to be, I just make a power setting adjustment. So 66 knots now. Again, just flaps 20.
Havasu traffic, Skyline 74 Tango Papa is turning final, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
Okay, gas and carriage mixture prop, seatbelt switches, flaps 20, taxi and landing lights are on. Speed is 63 knots. That's a really, really nice speed. And I'm a little high, so no problem. I'll take some power away. Now, when I take power away, if I hold the nose attitude the same spot with less power, I'm going to lose airspeed. So every time you make a power change, you need to anticipate that it's also going to take a pitch change. So I'm going to lower the nose. As my airspeed comes back, I might say, oh, well, then I'm getting lower than I want. So I fix that with power. As I add that power, then I need to be able to bring the nose up to maintain the exact same speed. So a little bit of up slows me down, a little bit of down speeds me up. My power gives me more altitude like an elevator. So we're looking great. 2 whites, 2 reds, 60 knots on the button, coming up over the numbers. And what I'm going to do is just slowly start bringing that power back and rotating the aircraft to try to hold it off as long as we can. I'm over the numbers, power's all the way out. And all I'm doing is continuously increasing back pressure and trying not to let the airplane land until it runs out of energy like that, and we just sort of roll it on the runway. That was so much fun, I kind of want to go do it again. How about you, Allie? You up for one more? Alright, let's do one more. Takeoff power set. Gauges are green. We're already going fast enough to fly. Let's get out of here. Wee-haw! We got a pretty steep deck angle. 55 knots there. So that's giving us a whole bunch of climb rate. Just wanted to get one in pretty quick here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Go from flaps 20 to flaps 10, taxi and landing lights are out. And as I pick up airspeed, then I need less and less of that right rudder in there. That was fun. Let's do another slow one, because that last one we did that was real slow. Made too nice of a landing. Alright.
Lake Havasu traffic, Skyline 74, Tango Papa is left crosswind, turning to a in close left downwind, and will be a full stop this time, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
And again, as I start approaching my target altitude, I just start sliding my right hand there with the power level out of it.
364, Echo 20 miles northeast of the airport, descending through 7,000, inbound for landing, runway 32. We'll cross over midfield to enter left traffic, runway 32, Havasu.
I don't know what the airplane looks like, but that is one sexy pilot voice.
You have no idea.
How was your ride back, brother?
We just had a great day. Sedona, lunch, over the Grand Canyon corridors, and almost home.
Well, it's beautiful here. Allie and I are just up messing around doing some videos in the airplane and self-quarantine, so we're having a good time.
Same here, bro. We're, see you on the ground, baby.
See you then.
Okay, gas, undercarriage, fixture, prop, seat belts, and switches. So, alright. I'm going to do another slow one because that was really fun. Bring that power back to 12. See if we can get it even a little slower this time. And flaps 20. Alright, I got all the nose up trim in it. There's 55, 54, 53, 52, 51, there's 50, 49, 48.
Havasu traffic, Cessna 2 Romeo Whiskey, taxi Desert Skies to runway 32. Havasu.
There's 45 knots.
Havasu traffic, Skyline 74, Tango Papa is turning final, runway 32, Lake Havasu.
We have to make real gentle turns when we're going this slow because remember the bank angle increases the load factor and raises the stall speed of the aircraft. So.
Havasu traffic, weight shift 32 deltas on a 45 to left downwind, taxiway Charlie, Havasu.
There's 44, 43. So we're coming down almost like an elevator here like this. We got about a 600 foot per minute descent rate. You can hear the whistling of the air vents there. I mean, we're coming almost straight down vertically. 43 knots, 45. And I'm almost out of elevator as it is. So we really got to be judicious with the power to stop the descent rate. Otherwise,
Havasu traffic, Bonanza 364 Echo descending through 4,500, 10
like
miles
that,
to the northeast of the
you get a big hard landing.
For landing, runway.
And that's what we typically use the go-around for.
Cross over midfield to make left traffic, 32 Havasu.
So if you have a steep landing like that and you don't like it, just add that power and take a ride off again. You don't have to live with a big hard landing, have a couple bounces, whatever. But because we're so slow, I'm pulling back on the yoke, and really it's not arresting that descent rate. We don't have enough forward airspeed to make up for it. So rather than just continue with a super hard landing and hurt your nose wheel or anything like that, Put that power in, take it right back off again, nothing to it.
Havasu traffic, Skylane 74 Tango Papa now left base, and will be a short final runway 32 Lake Havasu.
So now you can see we're on a really steep, really high speed approach. Got our flaps 20, and we're really high. Do a little bit of a slip here.
Havasu traffic, Skylane 74 Tango Papa, short base to final runway 32 Lake Havasu.
About 95 knots.
Havasu traffic, Bonanza 364 Echo, crossing over the top of runway 32 at 2,000 feet. We'll make left traffic.
And right now we're in what I call a slip. I got right rudder, a left aileron. We're cross-controlled. And what that does is it puts a ton of drag into the airplane and helps us lose altitude a lot quicker. Then I'll take that out here. I'm going to start pitching up to slow our airspeed. Get us right over the middle of the runway there. There we go. And right back where we started at a lot more airspeed than we want. But it bleeds off, and I just keep working the nose until we could just set it on the runway. And that is a pretty good cross-section of various landings using totally different airspeeds on the approach. You can see when you control your airspeed, it makes the amount of control feel that you need or that you want pretty consistent. When you are way too fast or way too slow, it just changes every time and it makes it hard to be consistent. So make a left turn here at Alpha 3. We'll get off the runway, do our after landing checklist, and we'll head back to the hangar.
Yeah, I did.